Hey guys, it's Rainee Romero with the lovely law firm and the Carolina Justice Report. I'm here with attorneys Sarah Austin and Amy Lawrence, and today we're talking about a hot topic that affects all of the medical community. Hey, so today we are chatting about a really hot topic that is kind of concerning a lot of nurses specifically with what's going on, and that is the RaDonda Vaught case that's going on right now. Just for folks that maybe don't know anything about this case, what do we know right now as far as the background?
So RaDonda Vaught was a nurse at Vanderbilt Hospital, and she was a floating nurse at that time where she would go and help out. She normally was in the neurological ICU from what I understand, but this time she was floating around filling in where she needed to be. And she was down in radiology where they'd sent her down, and there was a patient, and what was her last, Murphy, Miss Murphy?
Murphy, yep, Charlene Murphy.
Charlene Murphy.
75-year-old.
Yep, she had really bad claustrophobia, she had a brain bleed, and they asked
they were getting her ready for an MRI.
Right, she was claustrophobic, they wanted to give her a sedative to help her calm her down because she had extreme claustrophobia, and then RaDonda was ordered to give her some medicine.
Yes.
And I understand it was from an electronic, Amy probably knows more about it, but an electronic medicine dispenser
right,
where the nurses
which is
go.
common.
It's really common, and it's what it does is you put in a medicine that you want, the medicine the doctor has ordered, and normally what happens in this situation is there's certain types of medicine that are allowed that are checked off for certain patients under orders, and the system at Vanderbilt at the time was being revamped, and the scanners weren't working to scan the medicine and the patients. And then you also had an issue because normally it autofills with whatever's available for that patient. And none of that stuff was working at the time. So she types in the name of the medicine. It's not coming up. Nothing's coming up. So she types in what she thinks it is. Mm-hmm. And she has to override it because there's no medications in there that are under this medicine. She overrides it and gives, instead of this sedative to Miss Murphy, she gives a paralytic.
And it kills this woman. It kills Charlene.
Yes, she gets coded.
Yeah, I read that this medicine is sometimes used to execute inmates and executions.
Right.
And
this
so
is
it's
used to put people to sleep.
Serious of a drug that she accidentally gave her.
Well, and they started with VE. So I think the one that she was supposed to give is Versed, and then she gave Vecuronium, I think is how you pronounce it, instead. And so, I think when she was typing it in, she was typing in VE, and then of course, the very serious one came up, and that's the one that she gave. But Sarah, we were chatting a little bit before we started rolling, and you were asking well, why is something so serious, such a serious drug, so easily accessible to even get?
Yeah, I think that's a drug that they use in the operating room and only under super serious circumstances. So if you have an electronic system like that and someone from the radiology is ordering this drug, why is that even an option? Why would that name even pop up for this nurse?
Why would it be even this locked drawer? Right.
And why is it even in with every other medicine at the hospital if it's an execution drug or
something that's so powerful to put you to sleep?
Yeah, that's
permanently or not,
paralytic.
right?
Yeah.
Well, and this happened back in 2017. So it's been a long time, and supposedly Vanderbilt knew about it and covered it up, paid the family.
Yeah, and I will say this, Nurse Vaught she made a mistake, but she told the truth
right
along the way.
Right.
And she immediately told her charge nurse what had happened, and said I needed to chart it, and they told her not to. And then we have Vanderbilt, who has the death certificate read that it was a brain bleed, right? Mm-hmm. There's no mention of any of this. And then because they didn't chart it, the pathologist that looks at it, the person who does the autopsy, sees nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it all goes kind of unchecked for years.
Right.
And there was actually an investigation by the Department of Health of Tennessee, which is the licensing boards of nursing, and they found that it was just a mistake, right? And the complaint against her license is dismissed. And then they get sued, right? They do a settlement. We don't know how much that is, but it was big enough for them not to want to tell us.
And
Well,
they sued
in
the
the
hospital, right?
right,
They
right.
didn't sue her.
Right.
Well, and in the contract with the family, Vanderbilt, told them not to discuss any of that had
Confidential.
happened. So it was kind of all swept under the rug. But I'm kind of confused how it came back out since it was so quiet.
So there was an anonymous tip, from what I understand, to the Medicaid, Medicare department. And so why it's important that you chart these things and that you report these things is because that's a failure of a system. And we see this all the time in civil litigation, a failure of a system. And systems are going to fail. We can all wrap our mind around a system failing. It's when people turn their head and pretend like it didn't happen.
Right.
Because you can't fix a system if you don't acknowledge that it's broken, right? Can't fix what we don't acknowledge. So they're not acknowledging anything's wrong, so they can't fix it, so it can happen to somebody else. So somebody anonymously turns in to the Medicaid, Medicare board that this has happened, and then that opens an investigation. And instead of Vanderbilt just telling the truth, all of a sudden these charges against RaDonda come up.
Yeah, and I think they really detract from the hospital and the system failure, because now we're saying, oh my gosh, this nurse is criminally charged, this nurse is so awful, she did the wrong thing, but it's taking away from the why is that medicine even in that cabinet?
Right.
Why were they replacing that cabinet? They didn't give the nurses any other options. And so it's I think it's the hospital's fault 100%.
I do too.
That RaDonda was even in this situation.
Yeah.
But then when she's criminally charged, you're kind of, putting that blame on her and just kind of closing the book instead of starting from the bottom and going through, how does this happen? How do we never
fix
let
it?
this happen again?
In civil cases, these are the cases that really keep us up at night, because when you have an entity, and it's usually, we see it in police departments, we see it in med mal cases. My brother-in-law's a doctor, okay? And one of the first things I tell him is, if you make a mistake, you look that family in the eye. I said, your insurance is not going to like this, okay? Your hospital is not going to like this, but you look that family in the eye and you tell them that you're sorry, that it was a mistake, because we can all wrap our mind around a human mistake, right? We all make mistakes. And it's the acceptance of that responsibility and the need to fix it. If 90% of med mal cases would never come to fruition if somebody just looked at people and said, I'm sorry, this was a horrible mistake and it keeps me up at night. I'm going to make sure it's fixed and it never happens to another family.
And I think that she did that, and then look what happened to her.
Right.
Well, she
So
wasn't
that's
able
why-
to say it to the family.
She
of
couldn't say it to
course.
the family. You know what I mean? They had to find out later.
But she went through the proper channels to let people know that it was
And
done.
so what happens is Vanderbilt, instead of looking at that family in the eye and saying, I'm so sorry this happened in the very beginning, this is a system failure and we're going to fix it, instead they cover it up.
Well, they ultimately let her take the fall for it. I know that there was
Right.
probably a big settlement. I'm not
Right.
sure how much it was.
Yeah.
But they ultimately, it seems like, let her take the fall for it.
Yeah.
At least in the news, when you read about it, it seems like it was her fault.
I mean, when you were talking about someone's health care and hospitals, why are we implementing a new system that doesn't work, right? Why would you not run shadow systems to make sure they work before we all the way before we take out the old one?
Right.
These are the things that are going on that should have never happened. All the safeguards that should have been in place weren't, and no one took any responsibility for that in the beginning. Instead, they tried to cover it up.
Right.
And we see that all the time, and it drives me absolutely bonkers.
It just reminded me a lot of like the dram shop cases we'll have, or even car accidents when the drivers are criminally charged, and that's great and all, but what does putting that person behind bars really do?
Yeah.
And then you have, because we'll even have clients get so like, I want them locked up forever, but then at the end of the day, that doesn't really make anybody feel any better. But when the bars are over serving people, that's the problem. On the waterway, everybody's drunk boating, and where are they getting this alcohol from?
It's systemic, and we need to get to the root of it to fix it.
So how do you make sure it never happens again? It just kind of like all comes back to that. And for me, it all comes back to the hospital, because I think the consequences of this, of her being criminally charged and sentenced to, I hope, probation and not, I hope she doesn't have to go to jail.
I think that's everybody's prayer, right?
Is that nurses are going to be afraid, and hospitals aren't going to. The correct response would be hospitals giving nurses more resources, right? Because they're already understaffed and they're tired, and it's a pandemic, and fixing those systems so that they can work better. But instead, the consequences are going to be nurses are afraid and they're a little gun shy when they think that this is the right course of treatment for a patient. They're not going to want to override. When they mess up, they're not going to want to report it. And so I think it's just going to be
Well, that's why this case is blown up so much, because nurses across the country are zoned in on it, on holy cow, this is me, I am RaDonda, and they relate, and they just cannot believe that she has been put in this situation.
Well, the thing is overriding medication is something that happens every day, every shift, all the time, especially in emergency situations. And now, if I were a nurse and I was in an emergency situation and a doctor told me to order something and it wasn't in that system, I'd tell them no.
Yeah.
If there's something that will risk my life and liberty, and the time I have with my children, and I just wouldn't do it. I'd say, I'm sorry, I cannot until you put it in that system. The answer is no.
Right.
And it's sad that this person is, coding or doing whatever is happening, but I can't. We've pigeonholed them to not be able to practice medicine and to help.
So this happened in Tennessee, and of course her license was taken away. And, so recently she was charged with a couple of things and found guilty. So that was negligence of an impaired adult, and then also, what is it, a negligent homicide? Is that kind of what it's called?
Yeah, what it boils down to,
Homicide, yeah.
So, she has these charges. She is not being sentenced until May. So we'll find out kind of, I don't know, is that when it's sentenced, does she definitely get time, or do you think, can they take that away too?
I think that it can carry probation. There's not a minimum jail time sentence, but I think that it speaks volumes on what's going on in Tennessee and also with Vanderbilt. We know that the prosecutor in this case was a Vanderbilt professor that brought these charges. We had a victim's family who did not want the charges to be brought to begin with. And when you see that, when a victim or a victim's family doesn't want, that's just unheard of. You know what I mean? I've seen clemency for people on death row because a family has asked for it. Do you know what I mean? Because that's where our ultimate responsibility lies. You know what I mean? Because punishing her and sending her to prison does nothing. It doesn't make the world a better place. It doesn't take a criminal off the streets.
Right.
It doesn't do anything except punish, and then it puts the fear of God into every other nurse that comes after her.
I always thought, I'm of course somebody without a law background, and so I always thought if the family didn't want to do anything, there really was no case.
Well, normally that's how it is.
Yeah,
so I don't understand how.
It makes you wonder if the hospital was pushing for the charges in the first place.
Right, and that's what
I
a lot of the allegations, have been. That's what the speculation's been, is that Vanderbilt's behind this.
Because they don't want people to be afraid to go there.
Yeah.
If there was a big system failure, they've done nothing to fix the system. They don't, it's easier to blame one person, like I said.
Yeah, she's taking the fall for them. It's terrible. I was looking through, you go down the rabbit hole when you get involved in these cases because you feel for RaDonda, and there were different friends of hers that were showing pictures of them playing with their kids and all this stuff, and it really paints a picture of this very kind person who just had this horrible thing happen.
Well, I think to be a nurse, you have to be a caring person. No nurse goes to work like, I'm going to kill someone today. Their whole job is to save people. And so I think what I read about her reaction afterwards was very apologetic and very sorry. And how do I fix this, and how do I document it and make it right? I think she was misled, and now she's going to pay the ultimate price for.
I do know she's very, after the charges where she was, found guilty, after that was announced, I know that she was very relieved, just because this has been going on for years and years at this point. And I think at that point she was just ready to accept whatever was coming her way.
I think she accepted her responsibility in this a long time ago.
Yeah.
This was just, the icing on the worst cake ever.
Yeah, and make the worst day of your life worse.
Yeah.
Charging you for it.
Because we talk about this a lot too in our office, that even when you don't mean to. We've seen car wreck cases where someone's died, and then the at-fault driver, even if they're not at fault, or a police officer has to make a good shot, it doesn't feel good. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
When you're a good person and somebody dies, and you know that you had some kind of responsibility in it or hand in it, it's the worst feeling ever. Even when it's justified, it doesn't feel good.
Right. So now this has brought up a lot of questions, right? As we said, nurses are glued to this case and wondering what this means for them, and do they still have community support behind them? A lot of them feel like they don't now. And even with the law firm, we've been getting messages coming in saying, hey, I'm a nurse, and my other nurse friends are saying, make sure that I have malpractice insurance, and what does that mean, and do I need that, and will that protect me with something like this? So there's lots of questions going on. And I guess, the first question is, who has malpractice insurance and who needs it?
Usually hospitals carry it for everybody that's licensed and under privileges under that hospital. So, you know, we always see doctors, do they have privileges? Same thing with the nurses and staff that work there. Do they have privileges to work there? And usually they're covered under that. That doesn't insulate you from, but insurance doesn't insulate you from criminal liability.
And traveling nurses are a little bit different because they're coming from all over, and it always comes down to the insurance contract. Is the hospital going to cover its traveling nurses? And I know I have some family members who are traveling nurses, and so there will be a company that sort of helps an agency get those jobs, and sometimes that agency will have malpractice insurance. But if you're a traveling nurse specifically, you need to pay attention to whether you should ask that question when you take the job, or when you sign up with an agency. Do you have your own malpractice insurance? Am I going to be covered by the hospital? Because you best believe it, if something happens, that those insurance companies are going to find every way not to cover you. So you want to make sure you've got somebody covering you, and that you don't need to carry your own.
Well, what does having malpractice insurance protect you from?
I mean, it helps insulate you from personal liability.
Yeah, it'll protect you from, civil liability for if something like this happens. So if RaDonda, the hospital, because I'm assuming because they paid, that they covered her for malpractice. They paid because there was a big mistake at the hospital. She made the mistake, and the family got compensated for it. That doesn't happen if you don't have insurance.
Gotcha.
So if the hospital insurance wouldn't have covered her, say she was a traveling nurse in a different state, the family could have sued her. So she could be looking at jail time and losing her house, losing her cars, owing this family all this kind of money.
So it's still important to have, even though it may not fully protect you in situations like this.
It's never going to protect you from criminal liability.
Right.
But I think in this case, it should have been enough. The civil liability should have been enough that they got compensated.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a criminal price to pay for this tragic accident.
So what would you guys say to nurses? Is there any bit of advice, legal advice, to help them protect themselves, or steps to take if something like this happens that could help them if it goes to court?
I mean,
it's scary.
Get a lawyer immediately.
Yeah.
If something like this happens, get a lawyer immediately to get involved.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
to give you the guidance, because everything's different.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, she would have no reason not to trust the hospital and the reporting system when this happened. But I think all nurses now, if you make a tragic mistake like this, make sure you talk to somebody so that you are reporting it right.
Right.
Regardless of what the hospital's lawyers are telling you to say.
Well, do you think that she did everything she should have done, or is there something looking back that you think she should have done instead?
Personally, I think that medicine never should have even been in that cabinet. But
agreed.
That solves the whole problem. Putting nurses who make mistakes in jail is not going to keep the next thing from happening. Removing that medicine from that cabinet solves the whole problem. If they were replacing the whole system, that's fine. We're all for upgrades and technology and stuff, but there should have been like an interim system in place to keep this from happening.
What drives me really nuts about this case is that she made a mistake, and everything that she did after was did the right thing. You know what I mean? And if she would have lied, like they wanted her to, you know what I mean, and helped cover it up, we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
And that's what's wrong with the system. That's the ultimate system failure, right? Because when you do the right thing, the rest is supposed to follow. And instead, she got thrown under the bus, and now she's held criminally liable.
Well, folks, we are going to keep you updated on this. Of course, her official sentencing hasn't been set yet. That will happen in May, but we'll keep you updated on what's going on with that, and hopefully she gets an okay verdict and doesn't have to do jail time, but,
time will tell.
Yeah. All right, folks, you can watch, of course, all of the Carolina Justice Reports on YouTube. We also have our podcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere that you consume your media. Thanks so much for watching the Carolina Justice Report today. We'll see you next time.
When life gets ugly, justice is lovely. The love